Mexico draws millions of tourists every year. But some destinations hide dangers that travel brochures never mention. These are 20 places tourists wish they had never visited. Irapuato. Irapuato sits in the state of Guanajuato, and for years it held the title of the most violent city in Mexico. The numbers behind that claim are staggering. In 2019, the city recorded over 400 homicides, giving it a murder rate that placed it among the deadliest cities on the planet. The violence is driven almost entirely by cartel warfare. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel and the Santa Rosa de Lima Cartel have fought brutal turf wars across Guanajuato for years, and Irapuato has been caught in the middle. Shootings, ambushes, and mass killings have taken place in broad daylight, in public spaces, in areas tourists would otherwise walk through without a second thought. In July 2020, gunmen stormed a drug rehabilitation center in Irapuato and opened fire, killing 27 people. That single attack shocked the world and put the city on the international map for all the wrong reasons. Tourists who wander into Irapuato, expecting a quiet Mexican city, quickly discover a place where the rule of law has been stretched to its limit. Taxco. Taxco is one of Mexico's most photographed towns. Its whitewashed buildings, cobblestone streets, and hilltop church make it look like something out of a postcard. But Taxco sits inside Guerrero State, which carries a U.S. State Department Level 4 rating, the same classification as active war zones. The cartel presence in Taxco became impossible to ignore in 2024 when rival criminal groups began targeting the city's taxi drivers, accusing them of acting as lookouts for opposing factions. The violence forced local transportation strikes and left residents stranded. At one point, police were providing rides to civilians simply because it was too dangerous to use public transport. Tourists drawn in by Taxco's beauty often have no idea what state they are entering. Guerrero recorded over 1,300 homicides in 2025 alone. Armed groups operate throughout the region, and travelers have encountered roadblocks and confrontations outside the historic center. The postcard image and the ground reality are two very different things. Nuevo Laredo. Nuevo Laredo sits directly on the U.S.-Mexico border, facing Laredo, Texas, across the Rio Grande. It was once a common crossing point for American tourists heading into Mexico for a day trip. Those days are largely over. The U.S. State Department has issued a do not travel warning for the entire state of Tamaulipas, and Nuevo Laredo sits at the center of that warning. The Cartel del Noreste controls the city and operates with near total impunity. In February 2025, the arrest of a regional cartel leader triggered a wave of shootouts across Nuevo Laredo that was severe enough for the U.S. consulate to issue a shelter-in-place alert, urging American citizens to stay indoors and avoid the streets entirely. The international airport suspended operations during the violence. Heavily armed cartel members patrol the streets openly, and local law enforcement has limited capacity to respond. Kidnappings targeting U.S. citizens have been documented in and around the city. For anyone who crosses into Nuevo Laredo expecting a border town experience, the reality is a city where criminal organizations set the rules. Nogales. Nogales is split in two by the U.S.-Mexico border. Nogales, Arizona on one side, and Nogales, Sonora on the other. Many Americans cross over for dental work, cheaper prescriptions, and local markets. But Sonora State carries a Level 3 reconsider travel advisory, and Nogales has a documented history of cartel activity that makes it far riskier than most day trippers expect. The city sits on one of the most heavily trafficked drug smuggling corridors in North America. Multiple cartels compete for control of the crossing, and that competition regularly turns violent. Shootings and kidnappings in and around Nogales have been reported consistently over recent years, with some incidents occurring close to the border crossing itself. Tourist infrastructure in Nogales is minimal compared to Mexico's resort destinations, and the city offers little in the way of organized security for visitors. Many travelers who cross over expecting a quick, easy experience find themselves navigating a city where the risks are real, poorly marked, and easy to stumble into without warning. Reynosa. Reynosa sits across the border from McAllen, Texas, and for years it was a straightforward crossing for American visitors. That changed as cartel violence consumed the city. The U.S. State Department now lists Tamaulipas, the state Reynosa sits in, as Level 4, Do Not Travel, its most severe classification. In early 2025, the U.S. mission to Mexico issued a specific alert warning of IEDs, improvised explosive devices, found on roads in and around Reynosa. Gun battles between rival criminal factions have been reported in the late night and early morning hours. The State Department has noted that heavily armed cartel members patrol the area openly, and that local law enforcement has limited ability to respond to incidents. U.S. citizens have been victims of kidnapping in Reynosa, and the advisory specifically restricts U.S. government employees from traveling to the city. For tourists who cross over expecting a glimpse of Mexican border culture, Reynosa delivers something far more dangerous, a city where criminal organizations operate in the open and the risks extend well beyond petty crime. Mazatlan. Mazatlan has long been one of Mexico's most popular Pacific Coast destinations, drawing tourists with its beaches, seafood, and colonial old town. But since late 2024, the city has been caught in the crossfire of a brutal internal war within the Sinaloa cartel, and the numbers show just how severe the fallout has been. Between January and September 2025, Mazatlan recorded 95 homicides, a 227% increase compared to the same period the previous year. That figure surpassed the total number of killings recorded in both 2022 and 2023 combined. Kidnappings have nearly doubled since the internal cartel conflict began, with over 550 cases reported in just over a year. The U.S. consulate issued a direct security alert confirming that American citizens had been victims of armed carjacking and robbery on Federal Highway 15, one of the main routes into the city. Sinaloa State carries a U.S. State Department Level 4, Do Not Travel classification. U.S. government travel to Mazatlan itself is restricted to air or sea entry only. Overland routes are considered too dangerous. Tourists who book a Mazatlan holiday based on its reputation as a laid-back beach town are arriving into a city that has been dramatically transformed by cartel warfare in a very short period of time. Celaya. Celaya is a mid-sized city in Guanajuato state that few international tourists have on their radar. Those who do pass through often do so without understanding the scale of violence that has gripped the city over the past several years. At its peak, Celaya ranked among the most dangerous cities in the world by homicide rate. The conflict in Celaya is driven by the same cartel war tearing through Guanajuato, the Jalisco New Generation cartel pushing into territory historically controlled by local criminal groups. The result has been relentless violence, including targeted killings, mass shootings, and attacks on civilians. In 2020, Celaya recorded a homicide rate of approximately 109 per 100,000 residents, placing it in the top tier of violent cities globally. There is very little tourist infrastructure in Celaya and no organized safety net for visitors who find themselves in the wrong place. The city is not a traditional tourist destination, but it sits along routes that travelers sometimes use when moving between Mexico City and Guadalajara. Stopping there, or passing through at the wrong time, has proven dangerous for people who had no idea what they were walking into. Zamora. Zamora is a city in Michoacán state that has been at the center of some of the most sustained cartel violence in Mexico over the past decade. It sits in a region historically known for drug production, and that has made it a permanent battleground for criminal organizations fighting over supply routes and territory. The Jalisco New Generation cartel and a rival group known as Los Viagras have fought over Zamora for more than 15 years. The result is a city where homicide rates have consistently ranked among the highest in the country. At its worst, Zamora recorded around 105 homicides per 100,000 residents, a figure that places it firmly in the category of the world's most violent cities. Michoacán State carries a U.S. State Department do not travel advisory across most of its territory. Zamora in particular has seen roadblocks, targeted assassinations, and widespread extortion of local businesses. For tourists who stumble into the city, there is no clear safety zone, no tourist district insulated from the violence, and no reliable local law enforcement to turn to if something goes wrong. Uruapan. Uruapan is another Michoacán city that has suffered deeply under cartel control. It sits near the heart of one of Mexico's most fertile avocado-growing regions, and control of that agricultural wealth has made it a prize that criminal organizations have fought over with extreme violence. The city became internationally known in 2019 when 19 dismembered bodies were dumped on a main road on the outskirts of town. That kind of public display of violence is not rare in Uruapan. It is a deliberate tactic used by cartels to assert dominance and send messages to rivals. Local residents and businesses operate under a system of extortion that is effectively run by criminal groups rather than the government. In November 2025, the mayor of Uruapan was assassinated while attending a public festival, shot dead in front of crowds of people. The killing triggered nationwide protests in Mexico and underlined how deeply cartel control had penetrated the city's institutions. Tourists have no business in Uruapan, and the U.S. State Department's do not travel warning for Michoacán exists for exactly this reason. Tepito, Mexico City. Mexico City itself attracts millions of tourists every year, and large parts of it are genuinely safe and worth visiting. But within the city lies a neighborhood that operates by entirely different rules. Tepito is a densely packed district in the north of the city center, and it is widely regarded as one of the most dangerous urban areas in all of Mexico. Tepito has a long history as a hub for black market trade, organized crime, and gang activity. It is controlled by a criminal organization known as La Unión Tepito, which runs drug distribution, extortion, and kidnapping operations across the district. Violent confrontations between rival groups and police are not uncommon, and tourists who wander in, often by mistake given how close it sits to popular areas, face serious risks. Foreign visitors have been robbed, assaulted, and in some cases kidnapped in and around Tepito. It is not a neighborhood with a gray area. Travel advisories and local authorities consistently warn tourists to stay out entirely. The contrast between the vibrant, tourist-friendly neighborhoods of Mexico City and the reality of Tepito, just kilometers away, is one of the sharpest in any major city in the world. Tulum. Tulum spent years building a reputation as Mexico's coolest destination. Boutique hotels, crystal-clear cenotes, ancient Mayan ruins, and a wellness scene that attracted visitors from around the world. That image has taken serious hits in recent years as the reality behind the brand has become harder to ignore. Cartel activity in Tulum and the broader Quintana Roo state has grown significantly. In March 2025, the Tulum chief of police was assassinated by members of a criminal group. Shootings have occurred at beach clubs and in tourist areas, with a 2021 incident at a beachfront bar, leaving 2 foreign tourists dead in the crossfire. The U.S. State Department has warned travelers to exercise increased caution in Tulum after dark. Beyond the security concerns, Tulum has also disappointed tourists through rapid overdevelopment, polluted cenotes, unreliable infrastructure, and prices that now rival major international cities, often without the service quality to match. Visitors who arrive expecting the paradise they saw on social media frequently find a destination that has been overrun and hollowed out by its own popularity. The gap between the image and the reality has made Tulum one of the most complained about destinations in Mexico. Manzanillo. Manzanillo sits on Mexico's Pacific coast in Colima State and has the grim distinction of recording one of the highest homicide rates of any city in Mexico. In 2025, data placed Manzanillo's homicide rate at approximately 134 per 100,000 residents, a figure that puts it at the extreme end of violent cities globally. Colima State as a whole carries a U.S. State Department do not travel advisory. Manzanillo functions as a major commercial shipping port, and that infrastructure has made it a critical hub for cartel operations moving drugs and contraband through the Pacific. The presence of multiple competing criminal organizations in a port city creates a level of territorial violence that affects the entire urban area. What makes Manzanillo particularly alarming for tourists is that it continues to attract visitors despite the data. Its beaches and port access give it the surface appearance of a normal Mexican coastal city. But travelers who arrive without understanding the security situation are stepping into one of the statistically most dangerous places in the country, with limited tourist infrastructure and no meaningful insulation from the violence happening around them. Zihuatanejo. Zihuatanejo is a small fishing town on the Pacific coast that became famous around the world, partly due to its mention in the film The Shawshank Redemption. That cultural moment gave the town a romantic reputation as a paradise escape. The reality in recent years has become far more complicated. Zihuatanejo sits inside Guerrero State, which carries a U.S. State Department Level 4 Do Not Travel warning, the same rating given to active conflict zones. The State Department advises against travel to all tourist areas within Guerrero, including Zihuatanejo, citing armed groups that operate independently of the government, maintain roadblocks, and direct violence toward travelers. Guerrero recorded over 1,300 homicides in 2025. The danger in Zihuatanejo is not always visible in the resort zones, which has led some tourists to dismiss the warnings. But the broader state context is not a technicality. It reflects a genuine and documented security breakdown. Travelers who rely on the town's Hollywood reputation rather than current advisories are taking a risk that the travel brochures simply do not communicate. Cabo San Lucas. Cabo San Lucas is one of Mexico's most marketed resort destinations, and millions of tourists visit every year for the nightlife, sport fishing, and luxury hotels. But beneath the resort surface, the city has a well-documented problem with tourist-targeted scams, spiked drinks, and a nightlife scene that has turned dangerous for a significant number of visitors. Reports of tourists being drugged and robbed in Cabo's bars and clubs have been consistent over many years. In some cases, victims have woken up having been robbed of cash, cards, and valuables with no memory of what happened. The U.S. State Department has specifically warned travelers about the risks associated with Cabo's nightlife, including the dangers of accepting drinks from strangers and the limitations of local emergency services when incidents occur. Baja California Sur, where Cabo sits, holds a Level 2 travel advisory, lower than many of the cities on this list. But the pattern of tourist harm in Cabo is specific, well-documented, and disproportionate to its reputation as a safe resort city. Visitors who arrive expecting a carefree party destination and end up victims of drink spiking or robbery often say the same thing. Nobody warned them that this was a known and recurring problem. Colima. Colima is a small state on Mexico's Pacific coast, and its capital city shares the same name. For years, Colima has ranked as one of the most dangerous states in Mexico relative to its population size. The U.S. State Department has issued a do not travel warning for the entire state, citing crime and kidnapping as the primary concerns. Colima's violence is driven by its geography, and the state sits at a crossroads of drug trafficking routes along the Pacific coast, making it strategically important to multiple criminal organizations. The resulting turf wars have produced homicide rates that consistently rank among the highest in the country. At its peak, Colima recorded a homicide rate that placed it in the top 5 most violent states in Mexico. Despite the warnings, some tourists pass through Colima, often because it sits near more popular destinations on the Pacific coast. There are no meaningful tourist zones that operate separately from the security problems affecting the wider state. Traveling through Colima is a risk that most tourists take without fully understanding what the Do Not Travel classification actually means in practice. Playa del Carmen. Playa del Carmen sits just south of Cancun along the Riviera Maya and markets itself as a more relaxed, authentic alternative to its neighbor. For many tourists, it delivers exactly that. But a growing number have come away from the experience with a very different story. The city has appeared on multiple international lists of disappointing and dangerous tourist destinations. Crime, including robbery and assault, has increased in and around the tourist strip. Cartel-connected organized crime operates in the background of Quintana Roo State, and incidents of violence have broken the surface in tourist areas on more than one occasion. In 2018, a shooting at a music festival in Playa del Carmen killed 5 people, including 2 tourists, and injured 15 others. Beyond security, tourists consistently report issues with aggressive sales tactics, overpriced services, and an increasingly commercialized atmosphere that strips away the charm the destination is supposed to offer. The combination of safety concerns and a tourist experience that frequently fails to match expectations has placed Playa del Carmen firmly on the list of Mexican destinations that leave visitors wishing they had chosen somewhere else. Cancun. Cancun attracts more international tourists than any other destination in Mexico. Over 9.7 million arrivals in 2024 alone. That scale is precisely the problem. The volume of visitors has overwhelmed the destination to the point where it was named one of the world's most disappointing tourist destinations in 2025 by multiple travel publications. Tourists consistently report overcrowded beaches, inflated prices, aggressive sales tactics, and a level of commercialization that makes Cancun feel less like a Mexican city and more like a theme park built around alcohol and resort packages. The gap between the marketing and the experience has become a common complaint across travel review platforms, with visitors describing beaches described online as paradise showing up dirty, crowded, and surrounded by construction. Security is also a genuine concern. Cartel-connected criminal groups operate in Quintana Roo, and incidents have broken into tourist areas with enough regularity to attract State Department attention. In October 2024, a gunman opened fire on a beach at a major resort hotel, killing a Mexican national while tourists scrambled for cover. Cancun remains one of the most visited places in Mexico. But the data on tourist dissatisfaction suggests that for a significant number of those visitors, the experience is one they would not choose to repeat. Ciudad Juárez. Ciudad Juárez sits on the U.S.-Mexico border directly across from El Paso, Texas, and for a period in the late 2000s and early 2010s, it was widely regarded as the most dangerous city in the world. At its peak, the city recorded over 3,000 homicides in a single year, 2010, as rival cartels fought for control of one of the most lucrative drug trafficking corridors on the planet. Violence in Ciudad Juárez has decreased since that period, but the city remains one of the most dangerous in Mexico. The Sinaloa cartel and the Juárez cartel continue to operate in the region, and homicide rates remain significantly above the national average. The U.S. State Department lists Chihuahua State, where Ciudad Juárez sits, under a Level 3 Reconsider Travel Advisory, with specific caution advised for the city itself. Tourists occasionally cross into Ciudad Juárez from El Paso, drawn by the proximity and the curiosity of the border experience. What they find is a city that still carries the weight of its violent history and has not fully shed the conditions that created it. The infrastructure for tourist safety is limited, cartel presence remains active, and the risk of being in the wrong place at the wrong time is significantly higher than in most Mexican destinations. Tijuana. Tijuana is one of the most visited border cities in the world, with millions of crossings recorded every year between San Diego and the city just across the frontier. It also consistently ranks as one of the most dangerous cities in the world by homicide rate. That combination, mass tourism and extreme violence, makes Tijuana one of the most misleading destinations in Mexico. The city recorded a homicide rate of approximately 138 per 100,000 residents, according to World Population Review data, placing it at or near the top of global rankings for violent cities. Multiple major cartels operate in Tijuana, fighting for control of border crossing points that are worth billions of dollars annually in drug trafficking revenue. The violence that results from those conflicts spills regularly into public spaces. Tourists are drawn to Tijuana for its restaurants, nightlife, dental clinics, and the novelty of a quick border crossing. Many visits pass without incident, but the city's status as statistically one of the most dangerous urban areas on the planet is not a matter of perception. It is backed by verified crime data. Visitors who cross into Tijuana without understanding what the numbers actually say are taking a risk that the city's commercial surface does a very effective job of obscuring. Acapulco. Acapulco was once the jewel of Mexican tourism. In the mid-20th century, it attracted Hollywood stars, international dignitaries, and wealthy travelers from around the world. The cliff divers of La Quebrada became one of Mexico's most iconic images. What Acapulco became after that golden era is one of the most dramatic falls from grace of any tourist destination on the planet. Today, Acapulco sits in Guerrero State, Level 4, Do Not Travel, and carries one of the highest homicide rates of any city in Mexico. The state recorded over 1,300 homicides in 2025, with Acapulco bearing the heaviest share of that violence as the largest city and a major corridor for drug trafficking. The U.S. government restricts its own employees from traveling to Acapulco entirely. Armed groups operate openly throughout the city, and large areas that were once filled with tourists are now effectively off-limits. In October 2023, Hurricane Otis made direct landfall on Acapulco as a Category 5 storm, causing catastrophic damage to hotels, infrastructure, and residential areas across the city. Recovery has been slow and uneven. The combination of long-term cartel violence and hurricane destruction has left Acapulco in a state that bears almost no resemblance to the destination that once defined Mexican glamour. For tourists who visit expecting even a shadow of that history, the reality is a city that has been hollowed out by decades of violence and a natural disaster it is still struggling to survive. These 20 places are proof that Mexico's most marketed locations and its most dangerous ones are sometimes the same place. The next video on your screen covers places just as shocking, and some of them are even closer to home than you think. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more beyond belief facts, click on the video appearing on your screen now and remember to hit the subscribe button.